So we are 3 weeks in to 2025 now. So I reckon that this week, probably the kids around the country, they're probably heading back to school. In my opinion, that can't happen soon enough. And most of us, probably getting back into the regular routine now of work and business. Here at Team Productpreneur, we are all about goal setting and planning and getting everything organized for the year for our businesses and for our clients as well. And just really working out what needs to happen this year to achieve everyone's goals for 2025. Some of you may have already seen that we are promoting our results action plans, which are really designed to help e-commerce brands figure out their year ahead. Now, I'm not here to talk specifically about that promo here and now. Of course, you can hit me up if you want to know more. But one person who has taken us up on this came to us with a really common problem, and it just inspired this episode. And I know many of you listeners would have been experiencing a similar situation. So, of course, whenever that happens, I always want to dive into this kind of a topic on the show with you. So the business in question has been having an experience. They hired an agency last year to run their ads, and they were guaranteed a specific and very high ROAS, return on ad spend. And the agency, when they were pitching to win their digital advertising account, they made that promise. And it has been a common enticement designed to make the brand owner really believe that they are going to grow faster and more profitably than any other alternative. And, I get it, like that's the logical assumption. And it would have been true 5 years ago when digital advertising worked extremely differently. Back then, 5 times or 10 times or even higher ROAS results off cold traffic. So cold traffic being people who have never come across your brand, let alone bought from you before. That was quite normal back then. However, that was not normal in 2025, and it's certainly not what's real in 2025 so far. And we now operate in a world that is vastly different. There's, restricted data tracking, for example, much more strict privacy regulations and rules in regards to how much data you can track, either on platform. So when I say on platform, I mean, on Meta platforms or Google or, any digital marketing or advertising platform, but certainly not across platforms either. In the past, you could track what a website visitor might be doing if they clicked on an ad, they went to your website, they looked around the products, maybe they left, then hit up Google and all of this kind of stuff. You could really track very accurately, but that's not the case anymore. But in addition, over the last year, now we also have much more intense competition for each website click. And, also a lot more competition for each consumer dollar as well, for a multitude of reasons. And on top of that, a much lower level of consumer trust of any kind of branded digital content. And I'm not going to dive into all of the details of those constraints. You can certainly listen to my recent podcast episodes to learn a lot more about all of those developments in digital marketing and advertising and the impacts that they are having on advertising and website traffic generally. But suffice to say, promising a ROAS result is not only foolish, but it's also flawed. For starters, with tracking and on-platform reporting so inaccurate now, you actually just can't even trust the accuracy of those reported ROAS figures. Secondly, any really high ROAS figures that I'm seeing right now are pretty much always on campaigns going for the low-hanging fruits. So they would be branded search terms or existing engaged audiences or repeat customers, or campaigns offering really huge discount incentives, none of which you should be spending top dollar on with your advertising, right? Not if you want to make a profit anyway. And thirdly, there is a massive assumption that achieving a specific ROAS automatically means that you must be making a profit on sales from those campaigns after ad spend, product costs, and other overheads. But 99% of the time, that is just not true. So today on the show, we're going to unpack this a little bit together. By the end of this episode, I endeavour and hope that you will have a much better idea on why every e-commerce brand really needs to have the profitable productpreneur growth system in place in their business. Now, before we get into it, I want to remind you that I have my 2025 e-commerce marketing playbook resource, which I am offering for free at the moment. So this is a really comprehensive document. It outlines in detail all the key trends from over the last year, the strategies, the marketing and advertising and growth strategies that are working right now to drive profitable growth in an e-commerce business. And also the things that we all really need to be focusing on in 2025 if we want to have the most successful year possible. So if you haven't got your copy yet, go ahead and head over to catherinelangman.com/playbook. And we will, of course, include that link in the show notes for this podcast episode. Okay. Let us dive into this episode and let's start with a bit of a question. Hopefully you've already been thinking about this to date this year or even back end of last year, and that is, what is your growth goal for your e-commerce business in 2025? For Indigare Natural Beauty, my skincare and beauty brand, we are aiming for a 300% growth this calendar year with a net positive profit. And so this business, just to give you a little bit of context, this business is still in its early stages of growth. So we are still investing, really heavily in advertising to new customers and, more than, say, a mature business needs to, because we need to acquire new customers in order to grow, a lot more new customers. But we have been growing really rapidly. So I've had this business since mid-June last year, 2024. We're already trading at 3 times where it was at when I acquired the brand. So I'm super confident that we're going to hit this goal. Maybe we could go for more, but when you think about it, like 300%, that's a pretty significant growth, and yet also have to fund not just all of the advertising and marketing side of things, but there's also all of the, getting all of the product to sell. And, as we hit that kind of level of growth, there's going to be new team members. So there's a lot to fund when you are scaling up a business like that. So that's the goal for Indigare. I would absolutely love to hear from you listeners about your goals for this year. If you'd like to share them with me, I would just invite you to DM me at Kath Langman on Instagram or Facebook. But, just know that whatever that goal is for you, what got you to where you are now is not going to get you to where you want to be. And it won't for any of us, right? Rationally, I think we all know this, but the instinctive part of our brains often tells us to just keep doing what we've been doing because it worked before and it's probably less risky. But given the rapidly changing digital landscape that we all now operate in as e-commerce businesses and how hyper competitive retail is as we're all rivaling for a slice of the, more constrained consumer spending pie, the common reaction that I see for e-commerce brands is to lean heavily on what worked in the past. But that really isn't going to work. It leads to really burning out your existing audience, hammering them with bigger and more frequent discounts and things like that in an attempt to get and keep that magical ROAS figure where you want to see it. ROAS being in your advertising and, I guess to really squeeze as much out of your email database and all of that kind of stuff. But herein lies the trap. Let's say, like you like me, rather, are aiming for a 300% year-on-year revenue growth without negatively impacting or maybe even improving your bottom line. So exactly how that growth is supposed to happen is often an afterthought. Or the thought might extend to, I'll do things much like last year, but spend more on ads. And the only real consideration is often dollars in and dollars out. make a positive return on whatever you spend. And it's this that leads so many brands to use ROI boosting tactics like pushing more and more of your social budget toward retargeting, doing likewise. And caveat there, also, if you're giving your meta ads a ROAS target and you are using something like the Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, which most e-commerce brands are doing, it's super easy and tempting, not just for you, but also for these ad algorithms, if you're not setting things up otherwise, to go for that low-hanging retargeting audience as well, right? And then doing likewise with your paid Google ads through branded search term campaigns as well. And that's really easy to get a high return on ad spend, but the reality is, you're going to rank, you should be ranking number one in the organic search anyway for your own brand name. And so you don't want to overspend on those branded search terms. They're your warm audience. They're probably the lazy people who just start typing your brand name into their search field in their internet browser, and rather than actually typing your address in, they click on the top link in the search results, which is often an ad, right? Or inundating your email database with flash sales and even bigger discount offers. So in other words, you start spending most of your money advertising to your existing customers, and because they already like your product and they know it and they are familiar, they're happy to buy. The saying, as in marketing, we've always known that it's much easier to sell to your existing audience than new audience, because they know your product and your brand, and they're familiar with your website and where to find stuff, and they know they like it, etc., etc. And so when you do that, revenue goes up and your ROAS looks even better. And because you like those numbers a lot, you continue to employ the same strategy again next month and the next month and the next month. But those numbers mask a terrible truth, and I've seen this happen. First of all, because you are not building brand awareness with new audiences and you're not consistently acquiring new customers, you will eventually run out of your existing customers too. And secondly, by continuing to funnel more and more of your ad spend towards those warm audiences, your ad accounts actually stop learning where and how to find your new people. And so when you do go to try and replenish the coffers with new customers, you actually struggle to get conversions. Brands that manage to avoid this trap have three things in common. Number one, they spend more than 50% of their advertising dollars on new customer acquisition. For Indigare, and I would say most really early stages or new businesses, it's more like 90% for us right now. Number two, they increase their customer value rapidly after the first purchase. And number three, they know how to forecast and set targets, and they have the right data at their fingertips, so they know what metrics they should be tracking and are able to quickly identify or interpret that data, right? And identify when they're off track and what they need to do to get back on track. And so nailing this sweet spot can only be done by responsibly evaluating and then mastering your business's inputs to better control its outputs. So if a single-minded focus on a channel-specific metric like ROAS, return on ad spend, is a recipe for failure, then what is the alternative? Now, in my opinion and my experience, a growth-oriented strategy for an e-commerce business is anchored on principles like, number one, never judge your success or performance by a single metric. Number two, fill the sponge before you squeeze it. So by that, we mean add to your customer base before you keep hammering that database to keep buying again and again until they burn out. Number three, grow predictable revenue first. And number four, calculate and accept the highest cost per conversion or cost per customer acquisition possible while remaining profitable. So here's what this looks like in practice. And this is essentially a nutshell overview of how we approach our results action planning process. And so I want to go through a little bit of a hierarchy of metrics that equals a profitable e-commerce success story. Some of you listeners might have seen my anagram for it's like a three overlapping circles with, different inputs that equal, the center point, which is your profitable productpreneur. So we're just kind of going to break it up and talk about it here and now. So firstly, you want to figure out if your marketing efforts are winning or losing. And so although there is no one metric to rule them all, like ROAS, the closest thing that we have is a key financial metric. I haven't really spoken about this on the show before. You can think of it as your contribution margin. Now, this is not a number that your accountant would use in a profit and loss. However, it is a really, really useful number that kind of ties in your marketing and advertising and your growth forecasting and ad spend forecasting and planning with your accounting side, the financial reporting side of your business. And it's a number, it's not a percentage. And it's basically the dollars that you have left in a purchase from a customer after you deduct the ad spend on your advertising to win that order, your product costs, and any other kind of variable costs as well. So, there are a number of costs in an e-commerce business that will go up and down depending on how many orders you've made. It could be your transaction costs, it could be the postage costs, other fulfillment costs if you're paying somebody to pick and pack or a fulfillment warehouse, that sort of thing. And so sometimes, such as in the startup phase, the goal might actually need to be for this number to be zero, because you're investing in getting the conversion data that you need and winning the customers over to your brand, so that the ad platforms have the data to then figure out how to attract and convert new customers. Until you get that data, none of that's going to, you have no idea. The platforms are going to have no idea. That was certainly the case when I took over Indagare, because we had to start brand new ad account. And so there was zero data that we could use in there. Or perhaps in the lead up to a really significant new product launch in a more mature business, it also may be the case that contribution number might be zero. Again, just as you're really investing into that kind of a launch promotion. However, even still, it's not going to be enough to simply track this number month over month, because without even more data than that to give you more context or more data to give you the information that you need to make decisions regarding your marketing, there's going to be a lot, some pretty serious consequences for your ability to produce future profitable growth. So the second kind of level in this hierarchy of metrics is, what are the business metrics? These are the core business drivers that create value in your business. So these would be things like your revenue, your order revenue, your ad spend, your marketing efficiency ratio. So this is something that we track and report on externally to ROAS. So in the past, back when tracking and attribution was far more accurate, we would use ROAS, but now we really turn to the marketing efficiency ratio. So that's an MER acronym that you might see bandied about. And AOV, average order value. And then, when you take these kind of metrics together, they're going to give you a snapshot of your marketing's combined performance. And, this is going to look at things across platforms. So from paid social to email to any kind of search, whether it's paid or organic or anything else that you might be doing in your marketing. And again, this is not enough context to really understand the true effect of that performance in the long run. For that, we need to drill down even another layer. And this is where we need to really understand customer metrics. Are your new customer numbers increasing or decreasing? And so this would be, tracking things like the number of new customers that you're acquiring. What is the cost per acquisition to acquire those new customers? Your returning customer rate, and then even drilling down to the marketing efficiency or MER on both new and returning customers. And so most brands that come across my desk, they're not tracking these metrics at all. They might be winning in terms of revenue, but until they start putting their focus on the blend of the new versus returning customers, and really understanding the costs and the returns there, they often find themselves suffering the fate that I spoke about earlier, where the existing customer base is really declining over time. And then 4, we really want to be tracking some channel-specific metrics as well. So this is like inside Meta or Google. Are these platforms spending your money effectively? Also Klaviyo. So Klaviyo, as many of you listeners would have already learnt, are changing their pricing. And for some brands, it's going to have a short-term increase in the cost of their plan. And, there's been a lot of brands, a lot of e-commerce brands that I see and audit their accounts who are not using that platform effectively. And because they haven't been using it effectively and they haven't been keeping their list nice and clean, their costs are going to go up and their returns are going to drop. But that's not a reflection on the platform itself. It's a reflection on the lack of input in terms of effort and strategy, right? So we want to be tracking in-platform metrics like your CPM. So in advertising, that's the cost per million, where we'll track it like the cost per impressions, million impressions. So that's like a pricing methodology for these platforms: cost per click, cost per acquisition, and ROAS. Yes, we kind of track all of these in platform. No, they are never going to be super accurate. And they, like I've said earlier, given the lack of accurate data tracking, and, they aren't going to clearly represent the true situation that you'll get by tracking all of the other metrics that I've gone through already. But ironically, of course, many marketing and advertising agencies are still using these as their gold standard. But with the limitations in data tracking and therefore attribution, Facebook's reported ROAS provides such an out-of-focus picture. So why do we still track it in platform? Because obviously it's not because those numbers are accurate performance indicators. It's because they're how the platform itself makes decisions about how to spend your money. So, the reliability of in-platform data is almost inconsequential. Facebook and Google have to spend your money based on the data available to them, and you in turn have to make account decisions based on the way the platform is actually spending your money. So we need to use those in-platform metrics to judge the performance of each piece of creative and each campaign that you are running, and to make judgments and decisions accordingly. But in doing so, we always need to keep in mind the first principle of never judge your performance by a single metric. In the case of this prospect who came across our desk recently, it's the ROAS that they were promised by an agency that they were working with. So instead, the hierarchy of metrics aligns everything that you do in your e-commerce marketing and advertising around profit, with all of the other metrics subservient to that. And it helps you to tie in your goal setting and your planning and the strategies that you are intending to implement with your marketing and advertising to the financial side of the business as well. Now, there's a whole lot more that comes into our profitable Productpreneur growth system, around things like customer lifetime value and maximizing that, around the split between owned, earned, and paid traffic. It's the traffic pie. There's a whole lot more than that as well. And I'm going to leave those topics for another podcast, I think, or several podcasts potentially. But one final note about the profitable Productpreneur growth system that I really want to mention here and now, though, is that I hope it's clear from this hierarchy of metrics that I've described that the goal metrics for each business are going to be very different, depending on things like your gross margins, your potential for repeat purchases, and a number of other factors. So anyone who suggests that you should copy and paste the exact ads that work for another business, or who promises a certain result without diving into the particulars around your margins or your customers' buying behavior, that it's only going to set you up for a miserable and expensive failure. There truly isn't any other way to succeed in e-commerce unless you actually learn and master this kind of a system. Because when you really understand how all the puzzle pieces fit together and master the ability to tailor each piece to your own unique business, only then will you be in any semblance of control of your business destiny. Now, regardless of whether you ultimately do all of the marketing implementation yourself, which I would argue is not sustainable in the long term if you're growing it, aiming to grow a really large business. But if you do deeply understand this growth system and you have an idea of how it works and you do it yourself for a time, then you know enough to hold future team members accountable. So right now, for many of you listening to this, you might be realizing that you have a fair bit to learn. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed or intimidated by it. It is completely figure outable. Of course, the fastest way to learn is going to be to learn from someone who does it for a living and has real world experience. So if you are in that position where you know that you need to either start or do better with your marketing and advertising, and you're wary of staying up to date with all of the rapidly changing things in the digital marketing landscape, maybe 2025 is the year that you need to invest in some education. And of course, to start with, I would encourage you to download my free e-commerce marketing playbook. And again, that link to grab a free copy is catherinelangman.com/playbook. And secondly, I would invite you to book in a free coaching session with one of our brand growth advisors. You'll find links at catherinelangman.com or head to productpreneurmarketing.com/let's-talk. I'll pop all of those links, of course, in the show notes for this podcast episode. But right here and now, I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I hope it's been a bit educational. And I will leave you to digest all of that information, and I will look forward to being back in your ears again on the show next week. Bye for now.